After you practice the exercises in this chapter for a while, your ability to passively witness all your thoughts, emotions, and sensations without getting entangled in them will grow stronger. As a result of this practice, you might occasionally find yourself observing your mind not only during meditation, but even in the midst of doing daily tasks. As we discussed in the previous chapter, your mind is well equipped for multitasking. You can easily drive your car or clean your kitchen while simultaneously witnessing the activities of your mind. To observe yourself while you're engaged in any kind of activity is often called the practice of mindfulness. This practice can be extremely transformative in spiritual life because it can reveal hidden aspects of your mind. According to the teachings of Vedanta, suffering is the result of ignorance about your true nature. This ignorance is partly fundamental and partly psychological. Fundamentally, ignorance is failing to know your true inner self as Satchidananda, as pure consciousness, unborn, eternal, perfect, and limitless. Psychologically, ignorance is failing to fully understand the complicated workings of your own mind. For many people, the depths of the mind remain largely unexplored, like the bottom of the ocean or the vast reaches of outer space. Vedantic teachings are meant to remove ignorance about Atma, your true self. But those teachings don't directly address psychological blind spots, nor do they address psychological problems like unhealed emotional wounds or crippling anxiety. In fact, most traditional teachers of Vedanta assume that you've already overcome all such problems before undertaking the search for spiritual wisdom. But unresolved psychological problems can obstruct many pursuits in life, including the pursuit of spiritual wisdom. To resolve those problems, you have to understand how your mind works. Ultimately, you have to understand yourself both psychologically and spiritually. You can learn so much about your mind by simply observing your thoughts, emotions, and behavior throughout the day. This self-observation requires a strong commitment and value for being introspective from time to time. With a bit of effort, you can cultivate a tremendously beneficial habit of being mindful. This practice of mindfulness can lead you to discover certain inner forces that direct and motivate your actions. Those insights can help you make better decisions and shape your future more skillfully. This fact is beautifully expressed in an anonymous saying that's frequently quoted. Watch your thoughts, for they become words. Watch your words, for they become actions. Watch your actions, for they become habits. Watch your habits, for they become character. Watch your character, for it becomes your destiny. A powerful way to practice mindfulness is to trace your actions back to the thoughts from which they arose. Whenever you do something, you can simply ask yourself, why did I do that? You can learn so much about yourself from this practice. In time, you can take a further step and trace those decisive thoughts back to the subconscious impulses and desires from which they arose. But when you dive deep into your psyche, you might stumble upon aspects of your personality that are unpleasant and unwanted. Jealousy, hurt, anger, and pride lurk in every single mind. Issues like this have to be handled in ways that are healthy and healing. When you practice mindfulness, it's essential to avoid self-criticism or negative self-judgment of any kind. Every desire or hidden impulse you discover through introspection is simply a fact to be understood, not a reason to criticize yourself. It's crucial to remain detached and objective in the practice of mindfulness, like in the practice of sakshi bhava. If this practice leads you to make harsh judgments about yourself, it's probably best to set it aside for a while. Future lessons in this course will address issues relating to self-judgment and self-criticism. After watching those lessons and performing the exercises, you can then return to the practice of mindfulness with a much healthier perspective. The practice of mindfulness has helped me a lot over the years. When I was a young computer engineer, I discovered a number of ways to incorporate this practice into my daily life, both at work and at home. I'd like to share some of those ideas with you here. Basically, it's helpful to remind yourself many times each day to pause for a few minutes of self-reflection. A good time to pause is just after you finish a task. You can take a few moments to reflect before moving on to your next task. For example, you can pause and reflect at work after you finish a phone call or after you send an email. You can pause and reflect at home after turning off the television or after brushing your teeth. After finishing any activity, you can pause to briefly observe your thoughts, emotions, and behavior. You can also devote a few moments to self-reflection whenever you're waiting for something. For example, when you're waiting at a stoplight or in heavy traffic, or when you're waiting in line or riding an elevator. Another approach is to take a 1-minute break at the beginning of each hour to reflect on your thoughts, emotions, and behavior. You can also put notes in strategic locations that remind you to be mindful. Some activities are especially well suited for the practice of mindfulness. For example, while eating a meal, while driving your car, or while cleaning your house, you can simultaneously observe your thoughts, emotions, and behavior. You might be pleasantly surprised to discover how powerful this simple practice of mindfulness can be. This lesson concludes the chapter on witnessing your mind. Next, we'll begin the chapter on the psychology of meditation.